If you give enough space and be intentional about your progress, eventually you will, and I guarantee you, you will arrive at that state where your perspective, your body, and all your senses are ready to look beyond survival and set goals that are aspirational and look into what the impact you truly want to make and the legacy you want to build. For so long, we live in the socially constructed narrative that only the best and most talented can have an extraordinary creative career. And for those of us who are not that, we better get our head down and hustle. But what if everyone can have an extraordinary creative career? And the way to get there is not to erase who we are, what we want, and get lost in the aimless hustle, but rather the exact opposite. And that is what we explore here on the Everyday Talent Podcast. Hello, I'm Betty, your host, your fellow creative, and your creative career coach. Welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Talent Podcast. So today we have a very, very special episode where we replay and condense a two-part series that we published on the podcast last year to one part, which is how to support you to move beyond survival mode in operating in your creative business or creative career. 1 year later, this topic is still hugely relevant as a lot of creatives are still kind of in that space of navigating survival mode. And for me, recently I had a little bit of a aha moment when I realized the importance of moving survival mode and visceral feeling of how has it been different not operating in survival mode and have moved beyond survival mode in my own practice. This aha moment actually came with a fun anecdote. I was reading, or rather wrapping up the reading of Sarah Polly's memoir, One Tourist Danger. I highly recommend that book if you haven't read it. Sarah Polly is a Canadian filmmaker, writer, and the book is a memoir of her life experience in terms of how she navigates some difficult traumatic traumatic episodes in her life. Without spoiling it too much, essentially there is an insight shift or mindset shift that she experienced in her life that is valuable to one towards danger, one towards the things that you're scared of, rather than shying away from it. And when I was reading the book, I was really moved. And I thought, yeah, this is a great mindset to embody. And in fact, like immediately the next week, I was like doing all the things that I thought would be one towards danger. Like in the morning, I was doing cold showers. I was starting, like, you know, to reach out to the guests that I like dream of inviting on the podcast. I did a whole bunch of things that for me was dangerous, like quote unquote risky, but I still did it, and it felt really great. Then there came a moment that week that I said, "Wait a moment, these insights would not have made sense to Betty that was in 2018-19, who she was very much in a survival mode operating her creative practice. Because if I had heard it at the time, my brain would just immediately kind of reject this feeling of wanting towards danger because I already felt dangerous. That's how survival mode felt like. I had feel that like I was in a precarious place with my career. Financially, I was not meeting the place where just barely making ends meet, and everything felt like a semi episode of dangerous survival uh, reality show every day. So there and then it clicked in me that it's so important to one towards danger, but at the same time, it's so important to move beyond survival mode first. It's very ironic because as I'm recording this, there's like fire truck sirens at the back, almost like kind of screaming, danger, danger, danger. But that's essentially what it is, right? If we go with the flow here, that when we're operating survival mode, every day is all our brain is already screaming danger, danger, danger. that we can't take more risks than that. But intellectually, we know that in our creative practice, especially with running a solo practice, it's important to take risks. As artists, we take risks all the time to innovate, experiment, challenge the boundary of our craft. And so that inability to take risks really then hampers us to innovate and improve as artists who care about our craft. That tension will always be there if we don't move beyond survival mode. That's why I think it's important that 1 year later I bring back this series, and this time condensing one episode so that you can listen to it all at once at your own time. And I also thank my clients who have expressed to me multiple times in the past year how valuable this series of episodes have been. And your encouragement is what motivated me as well today to replay this episode. Now, without further ado, let's go to the episode about how to move beyond survival mode operating in your business and your creative career. So, as I mentioned, this is a two-part series. In part one, we are going to lay the groundwork of one, identifying whether you are consciously or subconsciously operating in that survival mindset. I'm going to give you some signs to watch out for in your own practice to identify and self diagnose whether you are operating in the survival mindset. And then the second thing we're going to do in this episode is lay down the first and perhaps what I would say the most important step to move beyond that survival mindset. Then, in the following episode of this series, we are going to dissect what to expect as you are in that change process, moving from survival to being at peace and joy with your practice, and to go to a place where is your mindset is positive, possibilities rooted. Because let me just give you a hint: the change process is not going to be linear. And I want you to feel when you go into that process very equipped to stay on course as you make this change, because this is possibly the most important change that you can make in your creative practice to truly get to the stage you always wanted and be expansive and receive more possibilities. So, without further ado, let's go to the first step to provide a diagnosis of how do you know if you are indeed operating with a survival mindset. And again, I must reiterate, it really doesn't matter which stage you seem to be at with your career. Very successful creatives still operate with a survival mindset, okay? So what we're looking for here are not external signs like what's your job title, how much money you're making, or how many clients you have, how many followers you have on social media. We're not looking at that. They're not going to tell us the true state that you're operating within. What will? I'm narrowing down a list of three telling signs for identifying whether you're in a survival mindset. As you listen to these three signs, take a deep breath, and I want you to be open and be very honest with yourself whether you're experiencing this or not. Okay, are you ready? Here you go. The first sign: when a new opportunity, whether it's a new gig, a new project, or a new job comes your way, you feel that you have no option but to say yes, even when deep down you sort of resent and can foresee that you will hate this opportunity. Number two, you think you're terrible with money. Even though you've been quite resourceful with different ways of making money and there's income coming in, and you know that there are some best practice around budgeting, financial forecasting, but you find those information overwhelming, and every time you try to get on with like increasing your financial literacy, you feel so much resistance, And every time you're hit by an unexpected bill, you're so frustrated with yourself. The last sign, you hate not being busy. And yet, you're always looking for time to do your creative things or pursuit or what you call personal projects. So, those three signs, the first one is about always feeling that you should say yes to everything. Second is around your belief around money. And third is how you feel space with your time. If you hit two out of the three signs that I just talked about, you probably are operating from a survival mindset. As you've heard the signs, you probably know now what I mean by it doesn't matter which stage career you're in. On the surface, you can appear to be doing so well, but if you're constantly looking for tasks to fill up your time, you have money coming in, but you're scared to manage it strategically, or you still feel there's absolutely no room for you to turn down something, chances are earlier in your career, you accumulated this habit and paradigm of operating in a survival mindset that you carry it with you even though you're no longer a beginner or even though your creative practice or business is not just barely surviving. And that piece, that mindset piece is the true blockage between where you are at and where you thought you should be now. If you're perpetually acting from this place of survival, you will always be stuck. And whatever the growth that comes with it is going to be 10 times less powerful than when you are actually operating beyond that mindset. The best metaphor I can think of is truly a technology metaphor. Imagine that you're a MacBook and you are still operating in like Mac OS 9 or 10, and someone is giving you software that can only operate on Mac OS 14 and beyond, and you try to download that software and install it. No matter how many times you try to install that, you know that it's not going to work because your operating system is not suited or not fitted for that software, that it requires a more advanced operating system. So same goes with the expansion and growth that you're hoping for. You are here spinning in circle operating in a survival mode, and even when a truly amazing opportunity comes by that we truly align with what you want to do, it's not going to sit well with this operating system of yours. Either you're going to break under the pressure of trying to achieve that opportunity or do a good job, or you grind through it so hard that the whole thing becomes a negative experience and another sting on how you perceive your path in your career. This is why when I work with clients, before we get to the nuts and bolts of tactics and strategy for advancing their career and work, we do this inner work of identifying what's the cycle of survival mindset they're operating with and how to break this cycle for good. And today, I'm going to share with you the first and foremost important steps to break that cycle. Before that, though, if what you've heard so far resonate with you, I want to invite you to check out my one-on-one coaching program. I've coached creative of all disciplines to move beyond aimless hustles and partner with them to do this exact work that we are talking about here. My clients have been able to hone in their unique path or shift the paradigm they needed to achieve the state of where they want to be, make their art, and make happier money. Check out the coaching program with the link in the show note, and you can book a free consultation call with me one on one. Okay, so back to how to move beyond the survival mindset. The first and most important step is reset your definition of success. It sounds very simple, right? And it is, but it's not as straightforward as it sounds like. Hear me out. When you've been operating in a survival mode for so long, the benchmark for success is what? Is survival. Whether that means making enough money to get by, working in an organization, or with clients that you feel like will get you some notoriety, but you don't actually like them, or keeping trying to network and make connections. Surviving in a creative profession, as long as you're working, as long as you have a living, a bad one, but a living nevertheless, and as long as you have a foot in the door in the industry, that's for so long means success, right? And to achieve this state, this current state that you're in, you sacrifice so much. Everything from your precious youth to time spent on love with loved ones and precious moments with your family to your mental health and physical health. You're in this perpetual state of stress and sacrifice. So much so that when you have some downtime to relax, you're still looking for busyness. In this state, I can tell you right now, it's really hard for your mind and body to imagine and believe that there's a success benchmark beyond survival. So, when I say go out there and redefine success for yourself, what will actually happen first is that you're going to identify what's not working with the current state and use the opposite of that as benchmark for success. I've seen this working firsthand with clients who are creatives. A classic coaching question is to ask, what will success look like for you? What is the state that you want to get to? And my clients, usually at the beginning stage of working with me, will always say, well, it means not burning out, Betty. It means not always being so stressed, whether with my time or with my money. It means not feeling so bad about myself, falling behind or procrastinating on the things that I think I should do, but I just don't have the energy or motivation to. It means not always getting scared or intimidated when people ask about my financial situations. It means restoring my mental peace. Hear how those phrases are phrased. They're not phrased in the affirmative sense. You don't hear, I want to do this, I want to build this legacy, I want to do that, but they're phrased in the corrective sense to correct a wrong, to take away the state that has not been okay for so long. That itself would be success. And I understand that. I really do. Even though sometimes I catch my clients and myself included would say intellectually when we hear that, we think that those benchmarks seems not very aspirational. And you probably, as you're listening to this, you probably go, well, I don't want that to be the ultimate picture of my success. That seems like really flat or just not very inspirational at all. But I want you to be comfortable with the discomfort and be okay that this is the exact first phase for resetting your definition of success if you've been operating in a survival mode for so long. Because even if you try to make up stuff like, oh, eventually I want to be the most known artist in my field, eventually I want to make a feature film with commercial success, eventually I want to do this and that, your body does not believe it. It's not going to feel real because your body is still stuck in trying to constantly aim for survival. It's looking for emergencies and problems to solve. It's looking for signs of danger. It's trying to like be safe. So I repeat, the first step of resetting definition success is be okay that your short-term success is really centered around recovery. In that phase of recovery, If you give enough space and be intentional about your progress, eventually you will, and I guarantee you, you will arrive at that state where your perspective, your body, and all your senses are ready to look beyond survival and set goals that are aspirational and look into what the impact you truly want to make and the legacy you want to build. That's when you don't even need to try so hard and your vision will come, because ideas are just fueling in your mind as energy flows naturally and organically within you and around you. Then that is the next phase, or what you call the truly aspirational and big picture success statement that you want to strive for, and you can work towards that. I've seen this happen with my clients again and again. Usually this moment happens like halfway through our fourth month engagement, because my one-on-one program is 4 month long. And those moments are usually quite endearing, because clients will come to me either through or in between email check-in or in a session and say, hey, something like this. Hey, there's this thing that's been bubbling or lingering in my mind. It seems really big and vague right now, I know, but like it's coming up so often, I thought I'd share with you. And that is usually the beginning of a hint of their big vision emerging. And there is usually, I say that it's enduring because usually there's still this like hesitancy and disbelief that they can do it, or like feeling that it's probably so vague that I shouldn't even like share with my coach. And that disbelief, I cherish it, because that's a moment of disjuncture from breaking what they've been so long working in that kind of like achieving sense and go mindset and doing just enough to think about the next day, the next month, the next thing. And it's not, basically they're not used to looking far ahead. And now this first hint of like a visionary idea comes to them, it doesn't sit completely well, and it's okay. Our mind and our body need to decondition and recondition to dream. Once that is achieved, once that definition of success moves from recovery to visionary goals, then the change process really begins. Where do we go from here? That is going to be the focus for the next episode. As a gentle reminder, really take the time and space to do this first step, okay? I know that like this stuff all sounds great and you're probably going to go rush and like try to like set the notification for the next episode, or like if it's already published you probably want to play it right away. But I want to remind you that this first step is really important, because if you're not intentional about this upfront resetting the definition of success or where you're heading, everything else that comes after is fake. If you don't do the actual work upfront and just make up like, okay, I think I'm good now, you're just repeating the same cycle again and falling trap for the survival cycle. This is not just like a quick fix process, okay? So I want you to really reflect after listening to this episode how this applies to your real context and how you might do this work. So, a little recap from last time. On the last episode, we talked about why it's important to address the survival mindset that is consciously or subconsciously running our creative career, and the phenomenon to which that many creatives operate with the survival mindset even well beyond the initial phase of developing our creative career, and even well beyond when we are quote unquote successful in other people's eyes, because that survival mindset is being conditioned in us from all the hustling, and we are operating with that and struggling with that even when we are making progress seemingly, whether it's financially, in terms of status, in terms of job title in our career.
And so we also talk about the first and foremost step in rewiring or breaking the cycle of survival mindset is setting or resetting your definition of success and what you can expect as you do that work of resetting the vision of success. So, with that, today, what I want to focus on is the meat of the change process. Once we set this definition of success, start with a clean slate and get a clear vision of what we want, not what we're told that we should want. What's next? This next phase is both fun and tricky because as human, part of us always crave for some kind of overnight transformation. And that moment that we bring awareness to, oh, I see now that I'm operating with a survival mindset. What do we need to do? Let's go. I want to change that and wake up refresh and be a new person. In some way, that is what happened to your thoughts and beliefs. But I'm here to tell you and set expectation for you that that aha moment is not going to be translating into this drastic feeling of waking up and suddenly you know everything about beyond the survival mindset. Uh, and this is something that I feel like most people don't talk about because when look outside and see all the marketing about change or courses or like skill development or even sometimes in some cases coaching, there's always this promise that like if we do this X and Y, we'll get to this like phenomenal transformation, but few people talk about how change and the change process is not linear and it takes work. And if not more work in that process than getting to the aha moment that of bringing awareness to how we've been operating, right? So that's why I'm spending time here and setting expectation for you to let you know exactly what happens and what to expect in the change process. So again, you feel good the moment when and that moment what might even happen when you're listening to the last episode when you identify that, oh, I now see that so far why I've been struggling is because that subconsciously the survival mindset that I develop within the constraints of the creative sector is carrying with me even well beyond the emerging phase of my career. But the next day that you wake up, let me tell you, from the outside looking in, it will look like you're just doing exactly the same set of action at your job, at your creative project, and for your career. You might go, what? That's not what I expected. I know, this can be a little bit disappointing to hear, but follow me on this. What's actually happening is that there has already been a seismic shift in your thinking and how you view your career. But how that thinking is translating into a daily action is actually more subtle. And I should say there are two kind of changes that will happen in your action. There's one that's subtle and micro, and one that is structural. Both of those kinds of changes take time and active noticing on your part for them to come in full effect. What does that look like? Let's talk about the first kind of changes, which is the subtle kind of change. Subtle changes in your action when you finally identify the survival mindset that like is operating your career and reset your definition of success looks like this. Instead of starting your week being completely overwhelmed and replying the message in your mailbox according to the order they come in, you might be starting your week with more clear intentions on what's the most important things that you can accomplish this week to move the needles on what matter the most. Subtle change on how you approach your week. Instead of working nonstop for like however many hours, you're bringing awareness to what time during the day energizes you the most. And you start ask the questions of what's required of you to show up in the way that you want and plan accordingly to feel and re-energize yourself in between projects, in between weeks. Subtle change, but significant. You can also look like you're not only reserving time for work and productivity, but starting to reserve time for your creative joy. Things that seemingly have no productive like means whatsoever, but it's only for you. Things that before you would label as selfish and feel guilty to do, you're now giving your permission to pursue those things. Again, on the outset, really small change, but these subtle and micro changes in your schedule, the way that you show up, the way that you think about how you want to show up, are going to compound and gradually shift, completely shift the way that you work. So, and I should caveat that this kind of subtle change, I just gave a few example, but I think you get the idea that those are the things that shift from operating from I'm not doing enough, I'm doing barely surviving, but operating from this mindset that I am enough and I want to cultivate myself and center on my priorities. So we talk about the subtle kind of change. Let's talk about the kind of big structural changes that will happen. And these are the changes that they are definitely not going to happen overnight because they involve different people that you work with. It involves the overall structure of your career setup or your practice setup. And it's going to take time for you to ramp up to it. Okay. This kind of change requires saying no's to things that you've always said yes to, shaking up the current ways of working, making shifts that maybe it was making shifts in your pricing model or your offering in your creative practice or side hustle in order for your career setup to be structurally more aligned to the North Star, that new definition of success that you've redefined for yourself. Let me give a personal example here. If you heard some of the previous episodes or have followed me for a while on Instagram, you would know that at the beginning of 2022, I transitioned from being a full time employee at a fundraising consulting firm who does coaching and filmmaking on the side to full time running my own consulting, coaching, and video production practice. One of the things that I clarified for myself in this process was that my definition of success involves heavily around two things: time, time autonomy and location flexibility. To me, as someone who has multiple links in my career and different interests, and someone who has family and friends in both Canada and Asia, a good life would mean that the flexibility to manage my own schedule and being able to travel between different cities when needs arise. And so when I transitioned from full-time employee to full-time managing my own business and career, one of the things that I knew is that the decisions that I make, every major decisions is going to move me towards the structure that would fulfill that metrics of time autonomy and location flexibility. And on top of that, of course, financial viability and financial, like, getting me to a comfort level that I consider the finance will equal to a good life. And so one of the things I knew immediately that no longer aligned was this one particular client project that was one of the most significant revenue generating project for my business, consulting business specifically. But it was as the project grew, the clients like needs grew, and it was more and more demanding a consultant and frankly in-house employee to do the work that would be able to tie to a location and be present for the client much more than how I envision I would operate as a consultant. Okay. So at the outset, at February 2022, at the outset of forming my own business, I gave myself and the client a 7 month runway to change the project, basically offboard the client from a significant project to a much smaller contract that would allow me to feel fulfilled and also would for them be able to find other like enough time for them to find other support, and I in the process actually supported them to find that other support. So this is what I a good example for what the structural change looks like. It requires time and planning to execute it, but there's no question about whether or not it aligns with my North Star. By making this offboarding decision, it's going to make me so much more aligned to what I envision as my definition of success. And from the outset, it looks like a very risky, bold decision. I mean, I was just starting my business. Who would make such thing of like cutting off one of the clients that is a major revenue generating stream? But I had trust that in my vision of what the success looks like, and I knew that by taking off this kind, it also frees me up, like not just my time, but my energy and mental capacity to take on opportunities that's more aligned with my vision of the future. And in the process, 7 months in the making, it was a process of me actively working on myself in breaking the cycle that I also suffer from, like that conditioning of working in a survival mindset. And I have to be honest, there was times in the middle of this like process, because like in the middle I didn't really have an other clients or like other clients to feel that like financial hole that this kind would create the moment that I offboard them. But and like those noises of like, are you really doing this, can you really do this, are you crazy to walk away from this big project? It was like like doubts did happen, and that's what I mean by like it's an active work to be aware that like when those survival mindset thoughts come up. But uh because I've been doing this work for a couple years now, and I have the support of coach, and as well I knew had such a clear vision of like what matters to me. I went through with the plan, and I'm happy to share that like now I've successfully transformed my relationship with this client, and they now have like the support that they need from an in-house staff. And on top of that, I did opening up that space for new possibility did get me new clients that are much more aligned with how I would evaluate as my success metric. So in the process of change, these are the structural change that one can expect when you're trying to break from that mode of operating from a survival mindset. And I want to again emphasize that saying a no doesn't mean like overnight burning bridges and just like ruining the relationships you've been building in your career. We operate from a new real world here, right? There are real human relationships at play. In this case that I gave you example, there's a client that I deeply care about. And in your case, it might be your clients or employers that you're saying no to. And I'm not encouraging, which is a big caveat, that you suddenly grow into this new person and you're going to break up with like everybody. Really want to honor that relationship you built so far, and that your decisions are interconnected and have an effect on other people and other organizations, and accept that it takes time for that process. As long as your every decision that you make and or plan for is getting you closer to the north star that you set out for yourself, then I think that you can give yourself the grace that things take time. So to summarize, on the path of breaking the cycle of operating from a survival mode, there are two kinds of change that will happen. One on a more day-to-day micro level, and one on the big structural shape of how you structure your career and practice. So at this point, one might ask the question, so Betty, how do I know that I've changed? Like I've gotten there of breaking the cycle and completely like successfully move beyond? That is exactly the question that I want to address with you next. Because on this change journey, especially if such involves so much inner work, that is sometimes hard to evaluate. How am I doing? How do I know that I'm on the right track of moving beyond always operating with this survival mindset. Because on the surface, we already know you can look at someone that's making money, like seemingly successful as a creator, but inside they can still be operating in that survival mode, right? So if you recall, last episode I gave you a list of 3 signs that to self-diagnose whether you are operating in a survival mindset. So in this episode, I'm going to give you 4 signs to monitor and self-evaluate. How do you know you're on the right track with this work? Are you ready? Number 1, if you are on track with this work, you've said no, big or small, to something that you have absolutely said yes before this work. And you've said yes to these kind of things before because of guilt and pressure. And now, even though you still feel some of that, you're aware what's the right decision. Okay, let me give you an example here. One of my client, she when she started working with me, it was a lot about finding the balance and making sure that like there is integrity to uh how to focus on the most important things on operating her creative freelance career. And there was this process of us working on evaluating both on the time, energy, and financial pros and cons of like all the different buckets she was managing. And there comes a time, there was this one particular contract of hers that was in question. And as we evaluate that in a coaching session, we really explore how everything is interconnected and what's the most important things for her to focus on. The answer didn't come during the coaching session, but after the session, when she go back and like really let everything sinking again, it was so clear to her that this project that she's been on so long no longer align with her energy, with what she wants to do next, with her vision. So it took some courage, but she trusted her gut and said no and basically break away from this project. And the, the resort initially, it was a little bit scary. Saying no to something that you committed for a long time is scary, right? But the resort is that afterward, just 1 month afterward when we met, she was telling me how holding space for that opening, saying no to that thing, opened her up for a new exciting project that's much more aligned. So that is an example for when you're doing this work on the process, you've said no to something that you've consistently said yes to or would feel compelled to say yes to. That's number 1 sign. Number 2, if you are doing this work on track, you have gained a better awareness when you're hustling and when you're not. And even when you're hustling for temporary needs, you would be able to have meta awareness that this is temporary and you go back to being more intentional and strategic. What I mean by that is that sometimes life and work does get busy, right? Like, again, this is where the realism of change comes in. You sometimes you are still on a project that demand you to work a lot. That was certainly the case when I was in that 7 month of transitioning from this kind that I talk about. Initially, I was still working a lot for this particular project. And sometimes you would know that like there's a high season and some of the structural changes that you were going to implement are not going to be fast enough to have an effect for this immediate time. And what is different is that instead of like kind of going grinding and going through this process and at the end of it beating yourself to it and just feeling so hopeless and tired, you're now having this meta awareness that, okay, I know these next 3 weeks are going to be a little bit hellish, but I also know that this is temporary because some of the changes that I'm going to make is going to take in effect in 3 months' time, in 5 months' time, and next year around this time it's going to be different. But for now, I'm going to can just like shift gear back to a little bit of the hustling mode, but I trust that I will come back to it. Again, this is what happened with some of the clients I work with. One client specifically, he recently had a high season of client demand. And in one of the reflection that he wrote to me, he said that I'm feeling this burn again in terms of being in the high season of having so much client work. But this time it's a little bit different from the last time. It's not the same as like how I used to feel. And there in them, I see him having this meta awareness of how to hold space for himself and awareness that like I see myself temporarily shift them like snapping back, but just that meta awareness is enough for him and for all of you doing this work to build the muscle back after the high season or after the temporary project need. So that's the second sign. The first sign is that if you can provide a clear answer to the question, when's the last time you felt so connected to your creative work? Whether that means losing track of time in a creative act and or whether you just feel so inspired with this little moment in your creative visual. And if that answer happens within, say, let last 1 or 2 months, or even more frequent than that, then you're on the right track of doing this work. Because nothing matters more and than that spiritual connection, almost divine connection that you have with your creative process. At the end of the day, as creators, one of the fundamental things that propel us to continue doing this practice and developing our creative process is that joy. And perhaps joy is not like the most complete word because I know that the connection that people feel when they connected to that one particular moment in their creative process is so unique. And sometimes like there's no real like words to articulate what that feels like, but you know it when you feel it. And if you've been operating in a survival mode, what ends up happening is that you miss it so much because you can't even tell when's the last time that that happened, and you get existential about why am I in the creative field at all. So if you have a clear answer on how when's the last time you felt so connected to your creative work, chances are you are making those subtle and micro changes to hold space for your creative joy. All right. Last but not least, the fourth sign of that you are on the right track of breaking the cycle of survival mode is that you financially invested yourself without deep guilt. This one is so crucial. And when I say investing in yourself, it can mean a lot of things. It can mean your well being, whether that is your physical and mental well being, therapy, coaching work. It can mean your creative joy, like you're going to invest in a creative habit or a creative hobby or something that is just purely for the joy of doing it, not for productivity per se, or your professional development, whether it's like something that a skill that you've always want to build, and or uh, something that is about the branding, or r- rather maybe it's about delegating something that you knew for so long you kind of hate that bucket of work and you could really ask for help, but you're always like worried that if you spend it's not going to like balance out, so you just rather not delegate. And that can mean like a virtual assistant or an actual assistant for some kind of project. And any of that is a financial investment in yourself or your creative practice. And if you're able to have like invested in that without this deep guilt that, oh my God, I just spend money. How can I spend money? I'm always like just barely making it. Then you that's other sign that you're on the right track of breaking the cycle of survival mode. Altogether, if you have any of these aforementioned signs, that gives you the breadcrumbs of understanding that okay, I'm doing the work. And I want to say what will happen is that you're not just going to do this, like what I mentioned as science, as like one time, one off things, right? Like you're not just going to be like, okay, I had it one session that I feel so connected to my creative work. Done. I'm breaking the cycle. No, what's happened, like, I mean, the word cycle is very apt, right? It's like you're going to go through the cycle of, you're creating a new cycle that is not the old cycle. So these signs I mentioned, you're going to do them once, twice, three times, and continuously as you move in that upward spiral away from operating from creative, like from a survival mode. As you grow your creative business, you're going to hire for more help without guilt. As you take back the time from aimlessly hustling and deepening your relationship with your creative process, you're going to have more of those deeply connected moments. How wonderful is that? And if you have more demand for your work, you're going to say no more often to the things that don't align with your vision and say yes to the things that align with your vision. And of course, the final signs of success is that you're there to achieve that vision of success you've set for yourself. And what's most important there is that you have your own back and recognize that these are the milestones and signs. What does that mean? It means you're going to get better and better at training yourself to not fall trapped for the conventional notion of success. And that's crucial because it's so easy that you can just like slip like your mind like that. Let me give you a personal example again. I already said that like one of the things that would define success for me is time flexibility and location freedom. And along with that, I believe that I can build a successfully creative practice that's multifaceted and financially successful. As someone who worked in the art store, I'm still in a lot of situation and conversation where people talk about moving up that arts management ladder, which meaning for someone with my experience, people would ask questions like, hey, are you one day aiming, or maybe in the next 3 to 5 years, aiming to be an executive director or director level position in an arts organization? And been asked that quite a number of times. And sometimes people straight up ask me, why haven't I pursued that? Why would I choose like do my own thing here and not do that? Because that seems like so obvious and attainable for me as the next step. In those moments, and this is what I mean by having your own back. If I were to like switch off, like, or rather switch on again that mindset of survival and think about, oh my God, yeah, that's what other people would do in like with my experience and my expertise. Why haven't I done that? Am I some kind of like am I not like thinking clearly about what success means or what should I be doing? That would be like if I slip back to that, I would start questioning that, am I doing the right thing? You see. But if in this new cycle that I've created for myself where I'm clear that my definitions such as time flexibility and location freedom is so clear to me that that's not the path. And by the way, I should say, if you are thinking of like a management position at an arts organization, and that is for that fulfills your mission of success, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not for me in this example that I'm trying to give. So for each or every one of you, you need to be the one that in times where those external questions and signs come up and question you about whether you're on the right path, nobody else except yourself can have your own back and say, wait a second, I know what I want, and this is not what I want, or that is exactly what I want. And if this is crucial in the process of doing this work, because only when you hone in those moments of like, wow, this was huge, this is a milestone, and other signs where I'm on the right path, that you can create your own cycle, a new cycle, beyond the survival mode. Because again, so much of this involves inner work, and no one else can validate you except yourself. I mean, partially, this is also why I've been so grateful to have coaching support on my own journey of carving my own path. Because sometimes this journey can get lonely, right? And the coaches out there that have helped me are there not just to like ease the loneliness, that's part of it, but also hold space for my vision and expand my thinking when those moments of doubts come up and I'm trapped again in that narrow vision or that temporary snapping back to the survival mode of thinking. So, always to say, change, and especially this kind of change that takes like serious deconditioning and unlearning, is non-linear. And sometimes it's okay for you to snap back and forth. But what's important is that you recognize the signs when you do make progress, and that you are patient with this non-linearity. And with that, you're able to going to make the decisions, big and small, ranging from daily, ranging from daily action of how you plan your day, and also to big structural change of how to plan the structure of your creative practice. Those big and or small decisions are going to one by one get you more close to your vision of success and be able to move beyond that cycle that you've trapped so long. So I hope this episode can support you in your change process. And it is a journey that is going to take time, but also self compassion and self belief that you get there. Thank you so much for listening to this episode.
I hope you like this episode that condensed the two-part series, lots of content, into one episode to support you how to move beyond survival mode in your creative career and your business. Of course, I'm always here to hear your feedback. So after you listen to this episode, if you have any thoughts and any reflection, I would love for you to reach out and tell me. If you're listening this podcast on Apple Podcasts, I also really appreciate if you follow the podcast and give us a review. This will go a long way to promote the episode and the podcast to many other creatives and support them in their journey. And then if you're watching this on YouTube, please hit subscribe and stay tuned for future episodes. May we all build intentionality in our creative practice together. I will see you on the next episode. Did you enjoy this conversation with Katie? I have to say, even having worked with Katie for 4 years, I still learned so much from this conversation about how she adopts some of the organization development and organization leadership framework in her own practice, leading live arts, as well of like her personal takes on many different things about creative career, about leading a creative organization. Thank you so much for your support for listening today. If you like this episode, I strongly encourage you to subscribe to this podcast in whichever platform that you're listening to the podcast, or you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel for viewing the video version of this episode. One news I want to share with you in case you didn't know is that I recently launched my very first group coaching program. The Conscious Creative Coaching Program is for self-employed creators or creative freelancers who are looking to design intentional growth for their practice so that they can make their art and make happier money. Full program details are to be announced later, but I've already opened up the waitlist. And by joining the waitlist, you'll be the first to know more details of the program when they're ready. So please join the waitlist today. I'll put the link in the show notes. You're already so creative. May we all build intentionality and consciousness in our creative path. I will see you on the next episode.